Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our public lecture, which is today co-hosted between the Manchester Classical Association and the Cultures of Disabilities in the Past and Present Network at Manchester Metropolitan University. So it's a collaboration between research and public engagement here in Manchester in classics and social sciences as well. And it's a huge honour to welcome to this event Professor Susan Deacy from Roehampton University, where she's a professor in the School of Humanities and Social Sciences. I'll post a link to Susan's profile in the Zoom chat so you can see all the wonderful things she's been doing. But she's the founding member of the ACCLAIM network, which she's going to talk about today, and has done a significant amount of work on working with young people, young autistic people, and classical myth. And she's part of some huge international projects relating to that. We also have Anthony Redshaw, who's going to do our British Sign Language interpretation. So there'll be sign language accompanying this recording, which we will post on YouTube as we arrange it afterwards. There's going to be some interactive sections of this, but Susan's going to explain how that all works. And yeah, so we're looking forward to this talk. And I'll pass straight over to Professor Deacy.
Oh my God, thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm really pleased that someone, Anna, has already put something in the Zoom chat. Now, one of the things I was so struck by last year when I started teaching, like so many people did via Zoom, is that a lot of people, not least autistic people, really like Zoom chat, okay? And when I ran an activity that's very, very much linked with the kind of things I'll be talking about today online, the Zoom chat has proved really, really useful. So one thing you can do if you like, you don't have to, right? It's not compulsory. And someone has actually said in the Zoom chat, would it be possible to email links and videos, etc. afterwards? One thing I want to say is that there will be a PowerPoint presentation, and it will actually include some hyperlinks. I probably won't ask April, who will be managing it for me, to open, because that would just make everything too kind of messy. But if anyone wants the PowerPoint slides, I am very, very happy to pass them on to you, or April maybe could send them on to you. And in fact, here they are now. Hooray! Thank you so much. And so they do include a few hyperlinks for anyone who wants to sort of follow up on some of the things that I've said. So one thing I was thinking was, while I'm just sort of getting started and giving a bit of context for the various things I'm going to be talking about this lunchtime, if you like, just say briefly who you are in the Zoom chat. You know, just say, well, your name, I guess, will be obvious. If it's not obvious because you've got some kind of like wacky Zoom name, maybe say who you are, where you're based, what your interest is in the realms of autism and classical myth, if you indeed have any such interests. So I thought that might be a really nice way to get us all started. So I'm going to I suppose answer various questions like, you know, why classics, why classical myth, why autism, and also why I'm going to be focusing on the particular aspect of autism that I am going to be the particular aspect of classical myth from an autistic perspective I'm going to be looking at, namely one relating to Hercules. So you can see some Herculeses, or as I should say actually, because of the nature of the reception I'm going to be talking about, Herculeses, okay? Right? I'm a Hellenist, but there will be more Hercules than Heracles this afternoon. You can see some in the rather bright picture on the first slide, but April, no, sorry, you can move to the second slide. That's totally fine, because a key artifact, right, that I'm going to be talking about is the one that is on the, sorry, I have left-right problems, on the right, no, left, sorry, left of the slide here, right, where the man in the middle right, is Hercules. So it's thank you so much, April. Him, yes, Hercules, that man. My gaze is always drawn to the man in the middle, because I'm very, very interested and intrigued by Hercules. I have been for years. When other people who perhaps aren't particularly steeped in classical myth look at this panel, their gaze is often drawn to the women. Right, so people often say to me, why Hercules? He's male. Why not focus on a female figure for the various things that I'm doing, right? Which I will introduce properly in a moment. There is scope, let me just say this at the outset, for activities linked with this panel, which is the focus of so much of what I do, that focus instead on the two women, and that even omit Hercules. Okay, so I hope I've conveyed that there's a lot going on in this image. It's one where every time I look at it, I see something different, and I've been looking at this for a long time. And when I look at it with others, right, a whole range of different sorts of others, these things keep coming to mind. Also, and so as April said, I am at Roehampton University. The panel, right, the chimney-piece panel, this is a chimney-piece panel. It's an 18th century chimney-piece panel, trying to look ancient, right? Trying to look ancient, and maybe sort of succeeding, right? Looking like it's been something brought back, right, from someone's grand tour and stuck, right, on the chimney-piece, whereas it is in fact 18th century. It's actually at Roehampton University, right? So I'm actually presenting something very much from Roehampton. Back in 2004, I left Manchester, right? So it's really nice to return, albeit remotely. I left Manchester for Roehampton.
It's about autism and classical myths.
And was blown away to discover that just 5 or so minutes from where I am now, right, over in that direction there, past the trees, etc., past a beautiful bucolic 18th century lake, there is an 18th century villa, now part of the University of Roehampton, where this chimney-piece panel is situated. Okay, so in putting this talk together and thinking about how I'm returning to Manchester, I've been sort of very, very much thinking about my past, coming to Roehampton, entering a new place. And this is going to be very, very relevant to what I want to go on to say, and the creative exercise that April mentioned that we'll do if there's time. Okay. So yes, I used to work in Manchester and live in Manchester, so it's just such an honour to be back at the Manchester CA, which is very much part of my academic and social life when I was in Manchester. And I'm just like so honoured also to be taking part in an event that is run also with the Cultures of Disabilities network, which I absolutely love. My over the years, and an interest in disabilities and disability studies, in what are the interfaces between classical studies, for example, and disability studies has been growing up and developing. And in the years since I left Manchester, I have increasingly become interested not just in Hercules, not just in classical myths, but also in autism. So what I'm going to talk about briefly now is how this interest came about. Just to give you a bit of context, it all started just a few years after I'd left Manchester in about 2008, when a completely new way of thinking about what myth can do was opened up for me. So it was a new way, but it was also a way that had been that resonated very, very, very much with my own experience of myth, my own first encounters with myth as a child, who found the sort of fantasy space of myth very reassuring and very exciting, and also very, very challenging. Okay, there's something in the interplay between the structure of myth and the sort of fantasy elements where anything is possible, or is it, that resonated with me as a child. And then I found out that it's something that resonates with a lot of autistic children. The aha moment was when I was in a meeting with a special needs teacher at a secondary school in the UK. And what she told me, when she found out, right, that I'm a classicist interested particularly in myths, she shared with me that in her experience and also in the experience of her colleagues, autistic children often love myth, including not just classical myths, but including classical myths. I started wondering why this is the case. And then I started wondering also whether there might be some opportunities for me as a classicist to create some activities, for example, right, that can build on, right, and build on this love and enable children to take this love in a new direction. So that was the original starting point. So one of the things I did was do something I'd been kind of contemplating doing for a while, but being a bit scared of doing. It was to blog. I started blogging, and so if you get the slides, if you click the link, Autism and Classical Myths blog, then that will take you to the blog. I'd love it if you were to visit it and comment and write to me, etc., etc. So I started blogging initially because I wondered whether I'd ever get anywhere, right, beyond this like dream of doing something at the interfaces between autism and classical myths. So I started blogging very sporadically, not least as a way to just get some ideas out there, see what responses I got. And I got some wonderful responses from classicists, from autistic people, from practitioners with autistic people. It was just wonderful. And then something wonderful happened some years after that, when my blogging and my interest in autism went from something like a dream I wanted to pursue to something I had to pursue because there were deadlines, right? Okay, so the fantasy and the constraints came together, which is appropriately mythological, when thanks to collaboration with various people who are here today. I've certainly seen Katarzyna Marciniak here, for example, and Lisa Morris. There might be others as well. I'm blown away by how many people are here, and I haven't looked to see everyone who's here. That's something maybe we can do later. So I linked up with people like Katarzyna and Lisa for a project that is looking at the place that classics occupies in children's and young adults' culture. And that includes stuff that I'm particularly doing on the role of classics in autistic children's culture. Okay, so that's my route in. So the project we're all involved in is very much looking at the intersection of so many different things, including between the local, the regional, and the global. And that's reflected in those of us who are part of this project. It's funded by the European Research Council. We're coming to the end of the funded period now. It was originally a 5-year project that was extended to one final year for COVID reasons. So we're still very much going, and there are various people here, including from the Roehampton side of things, who are either going to be taking part in the event, or will be watching the recording later. It's called Our Mythical Childhood, and if you want to find out more about that project, if you actually click this other thing, ACCLAIM network that appears next to it, right, that will take you to the ACCLAIM website, the ACCLAIM web pages that are very much part of the overall Our Mythical Childhood project pages, because one thing that happened over the years as I was working with people like Lisa and Katarzyna and others, what we found is that our interests in myth, in myth with children, and in the educational potential of myth were leading to some very, very interesting exchanges of ideas. And then, together with Lisa Morris and her colleague Ayelet Pierre at Bar Ilan University in Israel, we decided right, over lunch in Golders Green, where else, to join forces in a whole new way, and very much under the sort of aegis of the Our Mythical Childhood project, we started ACCLAIM. ACCLAIM, this is why there is a mixture, as you can see here on the slide, of big letters and small letters. ACCLAIM, oh my gosh, we spent so much time thinking about the possible name for the network. But this is what we came up with, and it's one that does sort of capture what we do. It stands for autism first, yeah, autism connecting, right, classically, right, CLA, classically inspired myth, okay, right. So it's a network for people who are interested in autism and classical myth and the interfaces between the two. It's a network we're very much building up. For example, two students who are either going to be here, two Roehampton students who are either here now in person, or will be watching the recording later. I think they have clashes with other lectures, etc. Will be building up our website by following on from things that previous students have done, namely to interview people who have interests in autism and/or classical myth. Okay, so so lots happening, lots of hopeful energy here. And the picture to the right of the Hercules panel is the picture that was created, the painting that was created specifically for Our Mythical Childhood. And it's one that I love thinking of. You know, I used the image of the aegis just now. It's a child who has wings. He's under protection of the wings, or the wings are his own because he's asleep in a mythological realm. So I just wanted to share that with you, because that's something that shapes what I do so deeply, that in our book of lessons based on the Hercules panel for autistic children, it's one of the images that I hope to include. Now the book is submitted, yay, go me. It's currently under review. I've had one rather marvelous set of review comments, which I'm responding to while we wait for other review comments. So I'm at that stage where the book kind of, you know, is finished and also is not finished. All right. I'm very much at the stage where any feedback that you might have on anything I say would be extremely welcome, and might even find its way into the final version of the book. I'm going to be talking about the key thing the book is doing, which is presenting lessons for autistic children. I've tried out the lessons with a range of people, including, most importantly, autistic children, along with a research assistant who I think is here, Effie Costara, who started work as a research assistant to work with me on the Autism and Classical Myth project very soon. We're going to be connecting with further teachers, trying out lessons with various classes of children. So what I'm doing, it's very much still in progress. I'm hoping that some of the things Effie and I do will find its way into the book, or can be used for sort of follow-up things in the aftermath of this project. I certainly don't plan to stop with the book. I would dearly devote my whole life to autism and neurodivergence. I'm a disability coordinator as well as professor of classics here at Roehampton. So disabilities, plural, autisms, are just at the core of what I do and what I'm interested in. I've got ideas for, you know, what I'm going to do beyond Hercules as well, right? There will be a focus on female mythological figures, and I also want to go beyond classical myth as well, right? I'm thinking particularly Polynesian, but anyway, just full of ideas. I basically, I love it, and I'm so honoured to be able to share this, you know, with people from the classical side of things and the disability side of things. April, could you move to the next slide, please? Because this is one you'll recognise, right? If you went into the Eventbrite site or the Cultures of Disabilities website, it's the image that I assume April picked for this, and it is brilliant. It is absolutely brilliant. So if you want the information of it, you can on what this is, just go to the Cultures of Disabilities website. I think it's there anyway, where it is explained. I decided to keep the PowerPoint presentation very, very straightforward, because I know messy PowerPoints, they can be problematic anyway, but particularly on Zoom, just sort of keep it simple. And one thing I like about here is that it sort of speaks in one way to just how many Herculeses there are, how Hercules is always or often seen as the great doer, right? The great action here. And that's one thing that a lot of people, including autistic people, like about him. It also speaks, I think, to an autistic experience of too much information, right? It's a beautifully busy scene, okay, as is for a different reason, the Chimney Peaks panel. You might not be able to see just from the photo I showed just now on the earlier slide just how detailed it is, but I do want to bring out some of the, thank you April, some of the details in due course. Okay, you might not be able to see here, for example, that there is a steep craggy mountain behind Hercules. There are a huge number of artifacts here, a helmet with a snake above it, various drinking vessels, lots of foliage, etc. It's a very, very busy scene, okay, which can be used very much to resonate with an autistic experience of zooming in perhaps on particular details in a scene, being very detail orientated, but also potentially feeling overwhelmed, okay, overwhelmed, the kind of thing that autistic children often are dealing with as very much part of their lives. So more on that in due course. But April, I just love that image you picked, and I wonder if I can include it in the book. But anyway, could you move to two slides on? So, oh yeah, okay. So this is a bit of a crowded slide, but it has also, I couldn't resist putting on one of the drawings, right, that will appear in the book. It is a close-up of one of the aspects of the panel, which is sorry, could you go back one, which is the helmet with the snake on top of it. Thank you, thank you, April. You're obviously you're such a wonderful teacher and communicator. This is so brilliant. That's exactly what I would have done, and in fact, I was reaching for the mouse to do it. So I thought, oh, how did I magically do that? What I just want to mention just very quickly is, again, two slides on, it's that long quotation, and I've included it because it enables me to convey through the words of the pioneering autistic activist and academic Jim Sinclair, how I see autism. Okay, so it's a way of seeing autism that is far more in line with the social model of disability rather than the medical model of disability. I am so very, very far removed from thinking of autism as something you can remove from a person. through my blog, I get various comments on my blog, including from people who are trying to get me to promote cures for autism. Oh my goodness! So yes, I wish if they actually read any of the content, they'd probably stop doing this. I tend to talk about, say, autistic children or autistic people rather than people with autism or children with autism. I understand why people want to put the person or the child first, as it were, but it does create a sense that autism can be separated from a person. So Jim Sinclair said this as long ago as 1993. It still seems very, very current. Jim Sinclair says that autism isn't something a person has, right, or a shell that a person is trapped inside. Autism is a way of being. Okay, I think that's the key phrase for me. Autism is a way of being, and this very much shapes the lessons that I've developed. It's all about, you know, engaging with that way of being. Now, autistic people do find things difficult, but right, that's because society disables them. Okay, that's the point I'm coming from. That's why I'm much more akin to social and other models of disability than the medical model, right, which looks on, you know, autistic people as in need of being divested somehow of their autism. So it's a way of being. It's pervasive. It colours every experience, every sensation, perception, thought, emotion, and encounter, every aspect of existence. It's not possible to separate the autism from the person. And if it were possible, the person you'd have left would not be the same person you started with. Okay, so this is something I very much, you know, carry with me, and it has informed and shaped and inspired me for some time now. Now, the quotation in the title of this talk, well, you might remember. It's actually April. Sorry, could you go back to the first slide for a moment? Because, like, rather than me trying, I might, yeah, just so I can just stress that. The one before that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So, okay. Obviously, there's the why classical myth can chime with autistic experiences, and I hope I've been given a sense of some of the ways in which I'm coming to this issue. But this first bit sounds like being autistic. Now, the reason I've gone for this is that it's a quotation from an autistic academic who was part of who took part in a consultation session I was able to run a few years ago with a range of autistic and autism practitioners and experts, and he's part of a network of autistic academics who are very much promoting the participation of autistic people in any research into autism. And he was someone who very much liked certain fantasy spaces like Westerns, right? Preferred the baddies to the goodies, right? The guys in the black hats to the guys in the white hats, for example. And he was also well versed, I think, in Norse mythology, but he didn't know much or anything about classical mythology. So he and the fellow autism specialists who were there very much wanted to know why classics, what's special about that? The answer is nothing, right? I suppose the answer is nothing, but classics has its own special side of things, just like other mythologies would as well. And so in order to address this question, I gave my reading of Hercules, right? The Hercules that is very much shaping the project I've been involved in now for several years. It's a Hercules who, just to sort of summarize it very, very briefly, can do things other people cannot, can succeed, right, through his own particular blend of characteristics where others cannot. He's always going into new spaces. He's always, right, having to learn the world afresh. No sooner does he perform one task, right, carried out in ways that nobody else could, no sooner does he solve one problem, then he's faced with a completely new set of challenges that, again, he needs to find a way to sort out. When he's in those I was going to say mythical spaces, but it's always mythical space. But when he's in these sort of fantasy worlds where he's carrying out these great tasks and always having to learn these worlds afresh, right? Just like when you're autistic, nothing is ever easy. You're always having to learn aspects of the world, seemingly big or seemingly small, afresh. So that's right. That's one thing. Another thing is when Hercules is out in the wilds, say, he functions very well, but then when he gets among people, things can go terribly wrong, right? There is this thing called, often described as the volcano effect, where for an autistic person, because there's too much information, there's too much going on, they can erupt, and that can result in some kind of meltdown. It can result in violence to others. And so when I outlined the behavior of Hercules when he gets so angry, upset that he commits terrible acts, right? When I said describe that together with the always needing to learn the world afresh, what the academic I've mentioned, autistic academic I mentioned, said was that sounds like being autistic. And I thought, right, that moment I thought, right, okay, right. I'm feeling like this is now moved from me thinking, me having potential doubts of what I'm doing, and just as one does, or as I do anyway as an academic, I thought, oh wow, okay, this is now moved on for me into a whole other level of sort of confidence and feeling sort of underpinned. Yeah, if you could. Move to the 5th slide, where now just to sort of segue in, the one after this, segue in like really neatly with what I've said. I mentioned that behind Hercules, behind the figure of well, whatever she is, virtue maybe, hard work perhaps, in the overall picture. Here in another sort of another drawing based on aspects of the panel, you have the steep, craggy mountainside that Hercules, if he chooses one path in life, is going to need to climb. And one thing that's interested me is that when people have done activities linked with this mountain, they don't always see it as a steep, craggy path. Some people have seen it as a stream that's running down the hillside. And one thing I think of from time to time is that it's like maybe we could, others have seen it as like a flash of lightning. And for me, it's also, maybe you can think of it as like lava flowing down from a volcano. It's the volcano effect. Hercules, not so much as one who's going to climb up to great heights, but the one who might explode, right? So it strikes me as a wonderful metaphor for what I'm doing. So you've got the mountainside. You've also got the seat. I have a favorite seat when I go into the countryside, where I live in Surrey for dog walks. It looks rather like that. I sit and contemplate, right? Usually I end up sitting and contemplating aspects of autism and classical myth, because that seat reminds me so much of the seat here. So I never stop doing anything, even when I'm dog walks in Surrey Hills. So what I've done then is I've been putting together a book, of lessons for autistic children, 10 lessons in total. So I spend quite a bit of time in the book giving some contexts, right, of who and what Hercules is, how I'm understanding autism, how people can set about using the lessons. They can be done as a set of all 10. All right, so they could work, for example, over several weeks in a particular class, or even doing something like a summer school, something like that. Okay, they all deal in some way with some aspect of myth and Hercules, but they all also deal with particular aspects of being autistic, right? Such as dealing with emotions, making choices, entering new spaces, communicating with new people, thinking about what others are experiencing, etc., etc. And so they can be done if the emphasis is on the myth side of things, or in a way that's like akin to the social stories for autistic people that Carol Gray started to develop. I think it was in the 1990s. And which have become very much at the core to autism education. They can be done like that as well. So if a teacher wants to work with pupils on things like, you know, going somewhere new, dealing with complex emotions, right? Autistic people often this is myth in that sense, myth in the sense of something that people believe about autism, that autistic people don't feel things, don't have emotions. Well, it's more that they can experience, I say they, right? There's also a saying about autism that when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, okay? There is no paradigm of an autistic person. But one recurring feature is that autistic people will feel emotions, like, you know, as in, you know, how could there be the volcano effect otherwise? But sometimes they might not show it, partly because it's all welling up inside and they're feeling so much inside, or they might show the wrong emotion, okay, like responding to, you know, a really difficult scenario or bad news, for example, by laughing rather than crying, okay? So they might be communicating it differently, but it's not that it's not being felt or not being felt deeply. So if dealing with emotions and expressing emotions and communicating emotions and regulating emotions is something, say, a teacher wants to deal with, they could include just that activity. A lot of the activities, okay, and this is actually, well, I say actually, maybe you already know this, this is something that is potentially quite controversial. There's a lot of colouring in involved, right? And this is something I really had to make a case for in the event with autistic experts and experts in the field of autism a few years back, because they tended to approach colouring in with some kind of trepidation, because they've had too many experiences of rather than students being taught in class, they get to colour in, right? Okay, but what I found is that when people who do the activities colouring in, they look in a different way. Children, when doing it, started to talk to one another about how they were responding to the scene, for example, right? So one thing you now, if I was actually up in Manchester, all right, and we were all together in a nice big lecture theatre at NMU, I would, oh yes, there would be handouts, right? I would, this is right, I mentioned Amphora. This is actually the Amphora, okay? It's got all sorts of stuff in it, right, that I've taken into schools, very much linked with aspects of the scene. And there's usually a helmet as well, but that's actually in an exhibition in the building next to me in the library at the moment, celebrating 21 years of classics at Roehampton, right? That helmet is there, so I'm holding the sword, wielding the sword quite problematically maybe, so I'll put it down. There are stickers, there are colouring in pens and pencils as well. So if we were all together actually in a room, right, yeah, there would be colouring pencils, there would be stickers, there would be handouts, right, so that while I was talking, you could actually have a go at engaging with the scene. If you want to take a printout, you would be very, take a photograph of it or scan it and send it to me. I would love to see it, right, if you do have a go at colouring in any aspect of the scene. There's also an activity involving not just sort of still drawings, but an animation of Hercules choosing or failing to choose, right? Because what he chooses and whether he in fact chooses is ambiguous in various sources for the story, and it's definitely ambiguous in the chimneypiece panel. Okay, so there's so much scope for people bringing their own experiences of choosing and making choices to what's presented to you. So there's an animation. There's also an exercise where people are invited to think about choice making and to think about how the present can turn into the future, which can be something that autistic people often find it hard to get their heads around. Firemaking, they're called different things, right, for different people. They were always called fortune tellers for me. You know, when you take a piece of paper, fold it up, right, and end up creating lots of little flaps, etc., where you open particular flaps and different fortunes are told, right? So different opportunities come up. So I love them. I know how to make them, but trying to describe how to make one was a real huge challenge for me. So there's a range of different types of activities then, and they can be done as an overall group, or they can be done individually. They can be done in any order. So that was one challenge, right? Trying to present lessons that work as a coherent whole, or can be done in any order, right? Now, inspired by one of the teachers who tried out an earlier version of lessons, my sense of time's gone a bit awry, what with lockdown, etc. But say, 2018, I think it was. I think, yeah, back in 2018. Inspired by her, I went from lessons that were a bit all over the place and a bit crazy. I had to do that first, right? I had to do that first to get my head around everything. No, they are crazy and all over the place, but there's a good structure. There's a firm structure as well. I hope it's a good structure. All of the lessons fall into the four sections that are set out here on the slide, right? Starting with, right, it's because the teacher had a bucket, right? Okay, this turned into this is actually a linen basket I bought from a supermarket. So I could take with me. So what she would do was, out of her bucket, I decided to call it an amphora to make it a bit classical. What an amphora is explained, and there is actually an amphora in the panel, right? So it's all very relevant and all links in. And it's a way of communicating something about classics in a very organic way. It starts by the teacher. It doesn't have to be. I do tell people how they might make an amphora. Okay, so there is that. But out of something, it could be a box, it could be a hat, could be anything, could be out of a folder, anything. The teacher starts by taking stuff that's going to be particularly relevant to the lessons, the lesson that they are doing. Handouts, colouring implements, pieces of blank paper, etc. So number one then is amphora. And then things get sort of increasingly more, I suppose, complex. Firstly, the students are invited to talk about a particular thing based around Hercules and a particular thing he's experiencing. Then they get an opportunity to, and that's likely to be very much sort of teacher-led. Then the students themselves get an opportunity to do something, right? It's then their turn. It's your turn, as I put it here. And that's off that. So that could be making a fortune teller, right? It is at one point, it's actually writing their own story based on what might happen next after Hercules makes a choice or doesn't make a choice. And it often involves colouring, using stickers, writing things on, whatever. And then what it builds to is doing something more complex, where students are invited, for example, to talk about. It can be kept very Hercules and myth focused, or it could be based around talking about students' own experiences of, for example, going somewhere new, experiencing new people, experiencing emotions, trying to work out how to initiate or respond to a conversation, and so on and so forth. So those are the four sections. April, could you go to the next slide now? Because on this slide, I want to acknowledge the artist also animator Steve Simons. The drawings there are a few of which are given here, including on this slide, and which very much appear in the book, are all done by him. Most of the drawings, including the ones on the left-hand side, are very much taken from the panel. And what Steve has also done is drawn for me and for the book various other drawings based on ancient and sometimes post-classical depictions of Hercules, not least because they also find a way, for example, I introduce Hercules as the great doer of deeds, but who has arrived somewhere strange, somewhere different, somewhere strange even for him, right? Even for him. And I do it by talking about how maybe he's just carried out some of his labours, right? So there's, you know, Hercules with a Nemean lion, for example, and one of the vases. Here, right, to make a point that Hercules isn't just someone who finds everything very hard. He's also someone who loves having fun, okay? In a way, hard work is fun, but also he loves feasting, he loves eating and drinking. So there's also an opportunity for the children to think about what they enjoy. Right? It's not just about what they find hard, it's also about very much what they enjoy. And here is an ancient depiction that it's a very convenient one because it shows him, as someone who's linked with things like hard work. There's his lion skin, for example, right? But that's hanging up. His club is to the right of him, not being wielded by him. He's put it to one side. He's holding a drinking vessel. He's reclining. Okay, he's got his hand out to receive. Well, maybe it's the lion skin, but maybe it's to receive what he is often shown receiving in visual depictions, namely food and drink. So he's a great lover of life, and that's something that's very much there on the panel, and very much something I make a lot of in the lessons. So that's a selection of details. Oh, I should say very, very quickly before moving on, you might have noticed that towards the middle there are two very similar looking depictions of Hercules. One where he's pretty unclothed, one where he's been clothed, and the figure that isn't shown here, the figure of well, pleasure, sometimes vice, but pleasure. She's been specially clothed, right? There's an unclothed version available, just as there is of Hercules, but because of all sorts of issues, including children and nakedness, and sometimes autistic people and nakedness, there's a closed version. So that's why there are two there. Could you move on to the next slide? Because on the next slide, what you've got right now, this is something that is very, very much core. So there is an unclothed Hercules in the middle, and a lesser clothed pleasure to the right of him. But this is the the clothed version. So this is Steve Simon's drawing of the whole scene. Very, very detail rich. And what I want to do now, I know that time's going on, and I should know by now that once I start talking about autism and myth, I could just go on all day. But it's something that can be done very, very quickly, and completely optional. But while looking at the scene, and maybe imagining how you colour it in, right? Because the colours you pick might be very interesting. Would you pick, for example, different colours for different sides of the scene? Would you pick certain colours for the side of hard work, right? Where the figure of the personification of hard work, with a serpent and a helmet next to her, and a sword in her hand, is pointing up the steep and craggy mountainside. Would you pick perhaps muted colours on that side? On the other side, the side of pleasure, where there isn't just fruit, but there's an overflowing, right? There's an overflowing fruit ball. There's the drinking vessels, there's the foliage, etc. Would you pick maybe brighter colours, right? For that side of the scene. And people have responded in various ways to this challenge, but think about what you would do, because no two people do it different. No two people do it the same way. But I have spotted some really extraordinary patterns as I've done these activities with a whole range of different people. Now, one reason why I'm showing the whole scene here is that I want you to think about, right, a time where, like Hercules here, you've entered somewhere new for the first time. It might be somewhere where you've got to really, really quickly work out what's going on. It could be first day at school, first day visiting Manchester Metropolitan University, for instance. So what I want you to just quickly do, if you want to, completely optional, put in the Zoom chat an example of a time where you went somewhere new. All right, it could be as big as, say, somewhere where you're starting a new job or a new school, or it could be the first time you visited a particular shop, for example. And if you can, put in some things about what you felt like when you visited there. What emotions did you feel? How did you manage to work out what you were supposed to do in this new space? Were there particular people there? Were you feeling afraid? Were you feeling excited? Were you feeling trepidation? I'll give people a little bit of time to get started on that, while also actually opening the chat, which I see is right now saying that a lot of people are needing to leave. So while people are doing that, and if you just don't have time to articulate it now and want to send me your thoughts later, you're very welcome to email me. Rather than just putting my name on the first slide, I put my email address. Okay, so s.deacy@roehampton.ac.uk. That's me. I would absolutely love to hear from you. But rather than asking April to go back to that first slide, April, can you just move on to the final slide? Okay, because there we go. That worked for me as well as I hoped it would. Now, here's one of many examples I thought about sharing with you. It's just one example of where at a workshop, this is a workshop for participants in one of the Our Mythical Childhood conferences, and also autistic adults at a cafe in Warsaw that is run by autistic people. Right, so it's an autistic space. Okay, and one of the participants at one of the workshops came up with this while I was sort of presenting what I do, I present it as an illustration of very creative things that people have done, and the way in which various messages, and also words being put, right, bubbles, speech bubbles, that's it. That's something a lot of people have done. I have various stickers that say things like that have various phrases on them. Some people have written their own things. Some of the children have got teachers to write it in, etc., etc. So that's something that's worked really well. I'm very struck by the way in which colour is being used here, and also the way in which the scene has been animalized very, very beautifully. The Nemean lion, right? That represents Hercules fulfilling the first of his labours by killing an animal. Here he's with the animal. The bottom. I said that the thing going up the mountainside is meant to be a path. It has been read as a stream. I've used it I've talked about it as a lightning flash. Here it's the bottom of the tail. It's the tail. It's been turned into the tail of the lion. And you can also see one of the overflowing fruit bowl that's been picked to be coloured in, and the amphora that I mentioned earlier. This is just one example. If you'd like to see other examples of how people have responded to the scene, I'd be very happy to share that with you. People have done things like cut things out. Okay, one person at a workshop actually cut out Hercules. I thought they cut out Hercules because they wanted to do something specifically with Hercules. No, they were removing him from the scene. They were actually deliberately removing him from the scene because they wanted it to be about the two women. And that harks back to what I said earlier about how it's so very often been the case that people's gaze has been drawn to the women, right, and how they're interacting rather than with the man in the middle. And there's also actually a medal at the British Museum that that used to belong to Hogarth, I think. So there's a very interesting story here. And on that medal, right, you have these two women, right? These two women that usually have Hercules in the middle of him, the personification of hard work and the personification of pleasure. They usually have Hercules in the middle. They're holding hands. Okay, so in response to any questions people might have around, why am I picking this most masculine of men, but also most feminine of men, most trans of people, right? Okay, there's so many Herculeses. There is so much scope for focus to taking him out and focusing on the two women. And having said the word women, I will stop. Well, I would just say something very briefly, right? Because Hercules is often well known, right? Even by people who don't know that much classical myth. Disney helped, right? But this is a story about Hercules that tends not to be very well known today. It was different in the 18th century, but today tends not to be very well known. So this is actually the point I'll end. And the great thing here is that everybody, pretty well, whether they're autistic or non-autistic, knowledgeable about classics, not at all knowledgeable about classics, no one is autistic or otherwise, child or whatever, is advantaged or disadvantaged. Everyone can come to this on the same page, right? So actually at that point, I will stop. And I can see there's a very rich chat. April, can you send me the chat? Because I would love to see that. And so thank you so much, everybody. I'm not sure if we have time for questions, but people could put questions in the chat. But anyway, I'll hand over to April because you can perhaps advise on what to do now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan. That was so enlightening and enjoyable to listen to you speak as ever about a subject you're so passionate about. And I can see how that passion spreads to autistic academics and children in the classroom and non-autistic people as well. So thank you so very much for that. I will send a recording of this talk on the Eventbrite to everyone registered and post it on the Manchester Classical Association YouTube account. And I'll include the links that Susan mentioned to the ACCLAIM network and the blog as well. Thank you all so very much for coming, and I will also send the links out to the websites for the Manchester Classical Association and of course the Cultures of Disabilities network, past and present, which is founded and hosted by my colleague Dr. Ros Oates, who is unable to be with us today, unfortunately. She sends her apologies. But there's lots of interesting things going on with that, and on their website you can hear other talks. We did have another classically themed talk from Dr. Emma Jane Graham on disabilities in the Roman world as well, so there's a recording of that available. But once again, can we please thank Susan, Professor Susan Deacy, for such a wonderful talk. Thank you.